Greetings and salutations. Welcome to Season 9, Episode 30 of the Ubuntu Podcast. In this episode, we're going to talk about millions of Pi. We'll also have a command line love and go over your feedback. I'm Alan, and joining me this week is not Laura, she's still away busy, but Martin. Hello Martin, are you there? Calling Martin.
Hello, this is North Hampshire calling, can you hear me?
Yes. Stay like that,
Okay,
Martin's internet, please. And Mark. Hello, Mark.
Hello, I'm still here.
Good. Super. We'll have a right old internet party. What have you been up to, Mark?
Well, I've been investigating a bit of an internet mystery.
Ooh. We haven't got any music to play there. Sorry, I just had to go.
I was at my in-laws' house last week, and as usually happens, I ended up taking a look at their computer.
Someone murdered the internet?
Well, not exactly. It was a bit odd because
with the candlestick in the library.
Yes, it was in the kitchen with the USB stick. There we go. Yeah, they had just for some reason noticed they got back from holiday and they found that from the start of the month till about, well, I think it was about 3 or 4 days after the start of their billing month, they'd used half of their 40 gigabyte internet allowance. Ooh. Now were they
busy downloading a podcast a lot?
Yeah, sitting on. Yes, they use what's it called?
Podbean.
That podcast client, Podbean. Yeah. Yes. No, they're not the kind to sit there on BitTorrent downloading the latest ISOs. So they thought it a bit odd that they'd managed to use all of this stuff. So I thought, well, maybe someone's doing something a bit malicious. So I thought I'd have a poke around and check that nothing odd is connected to their Wi-Fi. And so I managed to find on their router, it would bring up a network diagram of everything that's connected at the moment. So I went through and worked out what everything was and checked it off. And, I was asking, this says it's an HP device. What HP devices do you have? Oh, it's the printer. And they've got like a little music server. And then suddenly a revelation. Oh, we've got a couple of laptops in the cupboard. Oh, I turned them on for about the first time in 2 years. Oh, do you think they might have updated Windows?
Oh.
So they'd managed to download about 20 gigabytes of Windows updates just sitting there on the side after being off. Yes, and just completely rinsing their internet connection.
Well,
so yeah, that was an enjoyable half-hour investigation.
Not the first time somebody's encountered that phenomenon, and probably not the last either.
No.
Yeah, let us know if you've had rogue things on your network doing things you didn't know, but did know once you questioned the people who own those things a bit more. That's a bit too specific, but anyway, let's get on with it.
So, with the 10 millionth Raspberry Pi having been sold, we thought we'd have a look at what the Pi has done for the technology, computing and Linux landscape in the short while it's been around, and whether we still care about the Pi even. So
I thought you were going to go down the what has the Raspberry Pi ever done for us road.
Apart from educating millions of children.
Apart from that, yes.
So, do we still care about the Pi?
I still care about the Pi.
Yes.
I still don't have a Pi.
Really?
But it still makes me happy that the Pi exists.
Why? If you don't have one, what is it about it that makes you happy?
It's that there's a low-cost, easily hackable computing device which people can take and learn with.
Mm-hmm.
But there have been loads of those. A lot of the counter argument to the Pi from people who have other competing devices is there are other competing devices, and there have been for ages. The Pi isn't actually doing anything special that a BeagleBone Black can't do.
I don't think there's anything which has consistently competed with the Pi on features and price, is there?
Yeah, that's tricky.
I think that's fair.
Because there's loads of little single-board computers, but they all end up being,
they have
often twice as expensive as the Pi, which in the grand scheme of things isn't a lot, but it's twice as expensive as the Pi.
Yeah, and
the cheapest Pi is now £5.
Yeah, and some of these other, competing boards that aim to be a lot like the Pi or more powerful at the same price point or what have you, they don't have the longevity of support from the manufacturers. So, they're pumping out this great new little board, but within a year, they've already moved on to their next great little board, and the one that you've got is, obsolete and nobody cares for. But at least with the Pi, it doesn't matter what version of the Raspberry Pi you've got, you can still run the current version of Raspbian on it.
Yeah, I guess that's true. I mean, I'm thinking about all the other devices that I've seen or had or, touched, and when I've mentioned this before last year, or earlier in the year, whenever it was, went to the Embedded World conference in Nuremberg, and it was just a sea of small board computers, or everywhere you could see, from every large, small manufacturer, and all the other ancillary stuff like displays and keyboards and, I/O ports and support chips and everything like that. But it was just, the market was massive for those small board computers. And actually, I don't remember seeing any Raspberry Pis at that event at all. There was everyone else but Raspberry Pi, and all these companies with, clearly fairly significant budgets selling tons and tons and tons of these things. And they clearly do a lot of these events. But like you say, they do those, and then next year there'll be a different board on the stand. It won't be the Pi 2, like year after year. We've come to expect from the Raspberry Pi Foundation, is a consistency. So I'll give you that. There is certainly consistency.
So do we think that we have or will at some point achieve peak Pi? I mean, 10 million is a lot to sell, but is there a point at which everyone who's going to have one has one? All of the kids who are going to learn computing, have Raspberry Pis, and there isn't a significant enough future market to make it a viable thing, and it just kind of dies off like the BBC Micro did, and like every old computer ever made did. Would you think it'll peter out one day, or do you think there's enough of something around it?
I mean, I'm not sure the analogy to the BBC Micro works, because that was a generational thing, and then a 16-bit micros came along, and you look at the Archimedes, it was a
So you think that was because it was surpassed rather than technologically speaking?
Yes.
Rather than peaked. Yeah.
I think so. Although nothing ever came close. I mean, when you look at the BBC Micro, I learned something fairly recently, that the BBC Micro was actually just designed as an I/O device, and the real computer was supposed to be the thing that sat next to it, the tube, that connected via the tube, the coprocessor. That was supposed to be the real computer, and the BBC was just an I/O device, which is why it had tons and tons of ports all over it. But it actually turned into the computer, and I think that's partly what's happened to the Raspberry Pi, is people envisaged one use for it, but it's become a kind of general purpose, do everything kind of device. It was seen as you could use it for educational purposes, and I'm sure you can, and I'm sure there are people who do. But you look at all the other things people do with Pis, like, Terence Eden shoving a Pi inside an Xbox controller, or, the Picade, or, these clusters of Raspberry Pis that do, computing operations or build farms and stuff like that. People are using them. Mycroft, yeah. They're embedding them in devices like Western Digital releasing a Raspberry Pi based device. There's all these things that they never envisaged. So I think those are what's keeping it alive, right, for a large part, rather than the generational problem that the BBC had.
I think 10 million is just the start, really, because I don't think that of that 10 million, that's the majority of that is the intended audience, which is kids in schools. So I think that number's going to get larger as the Raspberry Pi Foundation builds on its mission to deliver education platforms and materials, not just in the UK, but in other countries. And they're certainly ramping up their efforts in America, where the potential child population for the educational market is huge. And so I think for general purpose computing, there is still enough in the Pi that hasn't been unlocked yet, that we still haven't got all of the potential of the hardware yet. And as the open source 3D accelerator drivers improve and become more stable, I think we'll see more pseudo desktop computing environment projects kicking off and people buying them as cheap desktop computer replacements for casual use.
I've never been a fan of that use case for the Raspberry Pi.
Well, it's interesting. You'd be surprised how popular it is, though, when you talk to normals. That's what they want to do with it.
Yeah, but do they?
Yeah,
I mean,
they do.
They say that, but do they really? I mean,
no, they really do.
Do they? No, they do. But do they really? Do they actually take the Pi and put it in an enclosure and connect it to a display and actually use it, or is it an academic exercise in that could be done, is it that it's actually done?
I've got friends that I would not consider in sort of the tech sphere, and they have bought a Raspberry Pi just to run as a thing to browse the web. That's all they do with it.
That's insane. Yep. That's insane.
Just to plug it into like the TV in the front room or whatever.
Martin, you said that you didn't think that the majority...
as more of the hardware facilities become unlocked, we could see more spin-off projects like that. And my worry is that it may get swamped with Android-related projects. That's my concern. And that will start to push what we would consider real Linux distributions to one side for those people that want to use it as like a general purpose computing device as opposed to a physical computing maker board or learning platform.
Martin, you said that you didn't think that the majority of the 10 million sales we've seen so far were for what you might consider the intended audience.
Yeah.
Do you think that's just because it's not been into the big markets? It's not in schools in America and, India and China and the really big countries. It's been, in the UK, and where, other than that, it's been where people who've wanted a Raspberry Pi have got hold of it because they've tried to.
Yeah, I mean,
do you think that's all it is, or do you think there's something about the way it's been released and marketed that's prevented it from gaining that traction?
I think that the foundation have been focusing on the educational angle, quite aggressively for the last 18 months or so, but they were very happy for the Raspberry Pi to be picked up by the maker community, and they were keen to sort of market to that to sort of see the success. So just anecdotally, what I see, and maybe I'm in my own bubble, but what I see is not a lot of use in large scale of the Pi in education other than very specific focused courses rather than extended periods of learning. What I do see a lot of is a lot of people making stuff with the Raspberry Pi at its heart.
I think what helps is the fact that it's easy to buy, or at least it was easy to buy, and it was at a price point which was disposable income for people who are aged 20 to 50, who are the likely people who would make, create stuff with the Pi, but are also the kinds of people who would buy one because it's interesting and then leave it in a drawer somewhere. So I would imagine there's a fair number of those 10 million. I'm not suggesting it's a double-digit percentage, but I would suggest that there are a significant number of those Pis that never actually made it into projects.
Absolutely.
Are in drawers, or like, maybe they will at some point. Maybe they're sat in and that's where the longevity comes in. Like, having a really old beagle bone you might not dig that out of a cupboard. And, when you come up for an idea of your killer project, but you might dig a Raspberry Pi out because like you say, you can just still go to the website and download an image and it's usable.
Yeah. It's like, the other kind of odd niche gadgety things I have that, came out for 6 months and then went back in their boxes, getting them going again today is a real struggle. And, running up-to-date software on them, you can kind of forget it. But you could get a first-generation Raspberry Pi out of its box and run the latest software on it.
Right. And I downloaded last week, the latest, Ubuntu Core Snappy image and put it on a Pi. And I've now got one sitting here blinking away. Its little heartbeat light blinking away at me every couple of seconds.
Is that all it does?
Well, at the moment, yeah. But I will use that for, doing ARM builds of stuff. But that's an image that is beta at the moment, but it's a new image will be coming out next week. And that's like the latest bleeding edge kernel, the latest, versions of GCC, the latest versions of all that software. Not some crappy old image that had to dig off an FTP server for an old device. So, I can see that being super useful. But what I want to know is what do you actually use them for? Like, what would you use one for? Where would you see it being useful outside of the education sector?
I've got two in full-time use doing different things. So one of my projects was I made a picture frame. So I got their picture frame kit, and I have a Pi on the back of that, Pi 3 with Bluetooth and Wi-Fi enabled. It's running Ubuntu Mate, and the idea is that we just send our photos that we like from our phone to this picture frame to keep it topped up with new photos. And it replaced an old Philips photo frame that we got eons ago that used to have to put an SD card in and stick it in the PC. Right. So that's one little project, which is quite natty. I'm quite pleased with that. And the other thing I've recently set up is just sitting there running an SFTP server on a Pi, which is on all the time. And that's so from my Ubuntu Pro 5, there's an app called UFTP, which supports FTP and SFTP. And I was used to, on Android, just having my photos get taken and automatically upload to Dropbox. So now I've got a Pi sitting there with an SFTP server. I use UFTP to send them to the Pi, and then the Pi has a cron job that periodically then pings them up to Dropbox for me. So it's like my Dropbox proxy for uploading my photos.
Your Dropbox.
Yeah.
I like that.
Yeah.
The main use that I have for a Pi, other than trying out images of Ubuntu Core, is a Picade. I love playing old games, Super Nintendo and old arcade emulators and stuff like that. And I have a very large SD card full of stuff.
But you legitimately backed up from your original cartridges.
Yes. Okay, then, if you like. And my Picade has a Pi 3 in it, and because it's Pi 3, it's got Wi-Fi, and so I also back that up over Wi-Fi, the same as I back up any of my other machines on my network to my home server. So I have a backup of all the emulators and stuff, and I feel confident that I always feel a little bit twitchy about updating. I don't know why I feel more twitchy about updating things like a Raspberry Pi than I do about updating my laptop via apt-get. I always feel a little bit twitchy about it. I guess because if that SD card blows up, I've lost everything. So I wanted to back it up, so I back it up over the Wi-Fi, which is quite nice. And having a battery-operated arcade machine, because, I could do all that with a laptop. I could put all arcade emulators on a laptop, and, that would have a battery as well. But the battery in this thing lasts a very long time and has arcade joystick and buttons on it.
Yes.
So that's, it's not... and see, this goes back to the whole, not one of the original designated, uses of a Raspberry Pi, but it's perfect for exactly that.
Awesome.
So I'd like to know what other people use a Raspberry Pi for, especially any weird esoteric things. And I'd like to know if people have actually seen them used properly in education. Like, have you seen a classroom full of Pis, or, do you have children who are in class who
tell me why I'm wrong.
Yes. Excellent.
Excellent.
Thank you, chaps.
And now it's time for Command Line Love. And this week's Command Line Love is sort of a continuation / a tangent from last week. So last week I told, last show where we did a Command Line Love, I told you about a bunch of keyboard shortcuts you could use for doing various things with the command you've got written in your terminal.
Oh, yes.
Now, the reason that it has all of those commands is because the bash prompt uses a thing called GNU readline, which is a library for handling input. And by default, that uses shortcuts based on Emacs, the text editor.
Oh.
Yes. Now, I don't use Emacs because I'm a rational human being. I use Vim.
Letters to Mark, please.
So I got thinking about this, and I had a nose around, and it turns out that you can change Bash and indeed anything that uses readline from using Emacs shortcuts to use Vim shortcuts.
No way.
Which means you can use all of the, delete 2 words, back and forward, jump to the beginning and end of the line, exactly like you do in Vim on your command line.
And that allows you to become, once again, a fully functioning member of society.
Absolutely. Excellent. So you do this, you run command set -ovi, that's just to do it in the current bash session, so you can put that in your bash RC, and then there's a similar command you can put in your input RC file, which is the thing that readline will always read. So that means that if you're doing something in, say, the MySQL prompt, it'll use it there as well.
Ooh.
Yes, so now I, while away my days by playing NetHack on my bash prompt, and and yes, it's great.
Excellent. Thank you for that, Mark.
We love getting your feedback, so please send it to us. Even the pointlessly mean stuff makes us laugh. If it's short, tweet us on @Ubuntu Podcast. If it's less short, but please no essays, email us on show@ubuntupodcast.org. If you'd like to discuss some of the things we talk about with other listeners, post on our Shiny News subreddit at reddit.com/r/Ubuntu Podcast. Or you can just leave a comment on the relevant show notes on our website, ubuntupodcast.org.
And here is some of that lovely feedback. Stefan left a comment on our website.
I was very pleased to hear that Martin is becoming a full-time Ubuntu phone user. I hope all goes well, and please keep us updated with regard to successes and problems.
I will. So far, it's going very well. I'm still finding new apps and lots of updates to apps. So far, apart from podcast listening and functioning Bluetooth, I'm pretty much set.
Michael Sheldon, one of the developers on Ubuntu Phone, uploaded over the weekend Scum VM.
I saw.
And,
awesome.
Yeah. Flight of the Amazon Queen, I think.
Beneath the Steel Sky.
Yes.
I've installed those.
Yes, I installed them on every single Ubuntu device I have. So, yes, it's good to see new apps arriving.
Not Martin left a comment on our website.
Hopefully this comment finds its way to Martin. Per the Razer keyboard patches, I would also recommend implementing the fix on mice with the side, back, forward buttons, having them fully functional with Kaja's abilities. These are not expensive mice, and I'm honestly surprised the amount of people using only 2-button mice.
Yes.
Yes,
Julie
I have
noted.
one of these. I have a Microsoft mouse that has a button on the side, and it doesn't do anything. And I don't know how to make it do something. So, yeah, I would like that as well.
I recently bought a new mouse, and I had the devil's own job getting a decent mouse that didn't have 11 buttons on it, that was sculpted for a right-hander and all the rest of it. So I'm quite pleased with my new 2-button mouse.
See, my back and forward buttons work fine.
Yeah, I think this might be a deficiency in a project that I'm involved in that he's highlighting here. I will.
Oh, right.
Yes, he has. I think he even submitted a pull request, so I should take a look at that.
Right.
Alistair Grant left a comment on our website. Oh, I'm going to read this one, apparently.
Whoops.
Thanks for your in-show reply about Ubuntu phone availability. I had sent a message to Meizu about when an Ubuntu phone will become available, but never got a reply. I'd also seen the posts about flashing the Pro 5. Lack of OTA updates scared me off. Meizu posted a tweet saying that they have an announcement coming on September the 5th. That was a week ago now. So here's hoping there's some good Ubuntu news. I went looking for Meizu announcements. I couldn't find anything from September the 5th Ubuntu-y.
Neither could I.
No. Will left a comment on our website.
If you look into the GNOME weather issue, you'll find that NOAA had announced the end of life for the API in question over 5 years ago.
Really?
Also, apparently the issue caused GNOME weather not to work, even for non-US users who do not use the NOAA data.
So,
Oops.
Here's an interesting thing. NOAA, who provide that weather service, that weather service is primarily used in aviation. In my previous job for 9 years, I was working in aviation, and we were using NOAA's weather service for what we did. We did not get that memo. So I don't think it's fair to say that GNOME should have, known about this because it was announced 5 years ago, because I didn't know about it, and this was key to what we were doing at the time. So yeah,
had any panicked phone calls from former colleagues?
Yeah, and although it's a North American organisation, they aggregate the data from weather stations from all around the world. So it is a global weather service.
Right.
Grey Panther left a comment on our website.
He says, I loved the command line love in Season 8, Episode 28. And I have no idea which one that was.
That was the one I was talking about just now.
Yeah, that's the one I was just referring to.
Stuff.
Yeah. And then Lucas Rangit continued.
Hey, Mark, your comment about Bash lacking data table support got me curious. I was able to find a solution to your example and found that with sort, you can use the -K to select a column in a file to sort by.
Yes, this is quite clever. So yeah, it's not as simple as just using the K switch, because you have to sort of specify the kind of data it's trying to sort as well, and it's not immediately obvious from the man page that that's what the K switch does, but it does work if you persevere and work out how to use it. So it's quite clever. So if you do something like LSA, where you have columns of data and you want to sort by something in particular in a certain order, you can use K to select the column or the range of columns you want to sort by and do clever stuff with it. So yes, sort is powerful and useful. I wasn't trying to diminish its usefulness.
Neat.
Right. And that's all of the feedback we have time for this week.
And that's all for episode 30. We'll be back next week when we'll have more news, more comment, and more discussion. And maybe more and different presenters. Who knows?
Excellent. That'll be interesting to find out.
It will, because we don't know. Brilliant.
Oh dear. Right. Well, hopefully that all recorded.
Let's hope so.
See you next week.
Bye.
Bye.
First time I've got to the end of a podcast for 3 weeks.